And then an hour later, I'd come out, and my eyes were so itchy, and I'd be scratching them, and they were like just, you know, bloodshot red.
Yeah.
And then an hour later, I was back in there again.
Yeah, the other morning, Ethan woke up and he's, like his mother, suffers with allergies and his eyes were swollen. It has arrived.
It has.
Unfortunately, allergy season. But it's also beautiful outside.
I love it.
You can't complain about the nice weather. Well, amazing show today. Amazing story. Please do set your DVRs, PVRs, whatever you do to record this show.
Yeah.
You're going to want to record it. This is a life story of my next guest. Reads like a film script. I don't want to give it all away.
Okay.
But she suffered a tremendous loss as a result of a close relative. You'll want to hear Marcia Smith's story, and that's just in seconds.
Okay, look forward to that,
Yeah.
Maggie. And you know, we've been hearing a lot about trying to forgive, love like you've never been hurt.
Yeah, this book.
Great book, pastor and author Jensen Franklin. He's teaching us how that we can get over some of these difficulties. So let's learn more with your conversation with Pastor Franklin.
I hope you've been blessed by these segments with Pastor Jensen Franklin as we've been talking about forgiveness, love, kindness. I know it could be a little challenging, but I think a good challenge for us of how we can live our lives differently. Now, Pastor Jensen, today we're talking about loving God like we've never been hurt. You tell this amazing story in your book about Wayne and his family.
Yeah. The Caston family, Wayne Caston and his family, they've been coming to our church for over 20 years. And it was Easter Sunday morning. His family, his son had come in from college, and they were all ready and dressed up, coming to church for Easter. And on their way, a car runs a stoplight. It's a terrible crash. The 18-year-old son is killed. The daughter is mangled, leg disconnected. It's horrible. The wife is in critical condition. Another child broke limbs. And my wife and I go to the hospital, and we see Wayne sitting there. He's lost his son. His wife is in critical condition, could die. Thank God she didn't. His daughter's in multiple surgeries, just trying to do repairs. And in those moments, it is so easy to, I think, question God and say, why? You know, why do bad things happen to good people? Why doesn't God do something? Why is He so silent when I'm hurting so bad? Why didn't He stop the car? He's God. I'm going to church on Easter with my family. And these unexplained absences of God, seemingly. He's there, but He's quiet. He's silent. And we tell in that story of how that Wayne, you know, reached a point where he decided, I'm not going to get bitter at God. I'm going to say like Job, the Lord gives, the Lord takes away. He never promised that I wouldn't go through things. We live in a human world. Accidents happen. Trouble comes. In the parable that Jesus told, He said, you're building your life either on a rock foundation or on sand. And when the storm came, it didn't skip the house that was built on the rock. It hit it too. The thing that made the house stand was the foundation it was built on. And when trouble, when adversity, when the Category 5 wind like this family went through hits your family, the only thing that will cause you to make it through and come out the other side with your faith intact, with your life and your sanity intact, is if you have been building your life on the rock, Jesus Christ. Listen, everything's better with Jesus, including trouble, including tragedy. He never promised we wouldn't go through it, but He said, I'll never leave you and I'll never forsake you. And there's a lot of people listening to us today that have lost people. Maybe you don't go to church anymore because you're hurt that God took a child with cancer. My brother died a few years ago, and he gave me, I'm in the ministry today. I was saved under his ministry, and he gave me my first opportunity to preach. And he was 54 years old and died of cancer. Beautiful family. And I had to cross a thing in my heart and in my mind where, I mean, he was so much better a Christian than I am, such a better person than I am. All I've ever seen him do was good. And it's hard to reason that stuff and say, why? Why, Lord? Why did you let this, your servant, die? His family needs him. And I had to reach a point in my own life where I said, you know, I'm going to turn this pain into praise. Yeah. The praise that cost you the most counts the most. And when you're in your midnight hour, like Paul and Silas, they sang praises unto God. If you can take the darkest times life gives you and turn it into worship and praise and love God like you've never been hurt, He'll use the wounds, the hurt, the pain. He'll turn it into testimony that can heal others and comfort others. And remember this, the pain you feel is the pain you can heal. Yeah. Because when you've gone through divorce, you understand what somebody's going through. When you've gone through the loss of a child or a husband or a wife to cancer or something, you know what it's like to take them to chemo and to see them, you know, go down, and you feel all the emotions. The pain you feel is the pain you can heal. Don't let it turn you bitter. Let God use what you've been through for His glory.
Oh, that's good. And God's not afraid of you asking those questions. He's not afraid of the question why. He has the answer, and in due time, as you look back at your past, you'll realize it will all make sense. And sometimes it will only take until you get to heaven when you realize why. But God is walking with you. And if you continue to walk with Him, as you continue to ask those questions, He will reveal things to you. Please do get your copy of Love Like You've Never Been Hurt. This is a good challenge for us to walk in the way of Christ today.
The human heart was created with a great capacity to love, but along with that comes a great capacity to feel pain, wounds from those who are closest to us. Can you relate?
Do you need your family to be reconciled? Do you have relationships that are breaking your heart? How long has it been since you spoke to somebody you care about? You need the book, Love Like You've Never Been Hurt. I wrote it with you in mind. I believe God has a now message for your life. Fight for your marriage. Fight for your children. Fight for your grandchildren. Fight for peace. Fight for restoration, reconciliation. This is no time to give up on your family. If you'll read this book, He'll give you a blueprint plan of what happened for me and my family. I know God can make happen for your family.
We'll send you a copy as our thanks for a suggested gift of $50 or more this month. This is a 100% viewer-supported program. We can't do it without you. To enjoy more of 100 Huntley Street, please call with your donation today, 1-800-265-3100, or visit crossroads.ca/donate.
It's so true, we can heal, but often it's a difficult journey, but not impossible. Again, we do encourage you to get this great resource. Get your copy today. Well, coming up next, a sensational story of a woman who suffered a tremendous loss. Here's Maggie with that visit.
October 23rd, 1987 is a day that my next guest will never forget. It was the day her life changed forever, and she lost the most important person in her life. Welcome, Marcia, to 100 Huntley Street.
Thank you.
Take us back to October 23rd. Started like any other day?
Any other day, except this was unusual. I was working as a nurse, and I received a phone call early in the morning to come in to cover a shift because somebody was sick. And so I said to my mom at that time, I'll drive you to work. We had moved across the city to get away from my stepfather. And so I said, I'll take you to work and then I'll head downtown to the hospital. And, you know, rushed out of the house, and we're on the 401, and I saw my stepfather, you know, which is unusual. 401's quite busy, and it's 6 o'clock in the morning. So anyways, we ignored it, and I arrived at my mom's workplace, which was the Holiday Inn, just off the 427. It's now torn down, but it had a circular driveway. And
before we go any further, let's get some context. So you and your mom were very close.
Correct. I was her only child, and so I was her baby.
Yeah.
And so everything was Marcy. And, you know, so it was just the two of us until she married for about 8 years. And, you know, it was an adjustment having a stepfather, but we continued to have a very close relationship.
And so you said that you had to move away from your stepfather. What exactly?
Right. And so he became increasingly aggressive in the latter part of the marriage. And then one day they were having a fight. And then, of course, being the daughter, I stepped into it. And at that point, he assaulted my mother and then assaulted me. And then, you know, that just says this is now a serious occasion.
Yeah.
And so the police was called. Of course, he was not happy about that. And then there is now a restraining order against him from coming close to us.
And so how did your mom handle that? Just, you know, obviously a man that she loved and then all of a sudden a severed relationship.
Right. So she was afraid. And in that fear, she kept things from me. So I did not know the depth of how he was calling and threatening her until afterwards. And even with the restraining order, I remember one day he tried to get into our apartment with a crowbar.
Wow.
And that's what prompted, you know, that we needed to move. But because we both worked in the city, how far do you move away?
And how does faith play a role as you fear for your life? Someone's trying to break into your residence with a crowbar, you're fleeing from something. Does faith play an aspect in that?
Well, at that point, I did not know Christ. I had grown up knowing that I had to give my life to God, but I was going to do that when I was much older, because I thought that those who followed Christ were boring and they didn't have any fun.
Yeah.
And so I had put that off. It was in the back of my mind. But at that time, you know, basically I knew God existed, but there was no relationship with God. And
so we go back to October 23rd, and again, normal day. You decide you have to go into work. So you decide you're going to take your mom to work first.
Yes, yes. So I drove across the 401, head down the 427, and everything changed that day in my life. And
so he was there in the parking lot. Take us through those moments.
Right. So there was a circular driveway, so I pulled in at the entrance to let my mom off. And as soon as I did that, he pulled in his car. And so now our cars were now facing each other. And I turned to my mom and I said, I'll just reverse out. And she says, no, Mercy, I'll just go see what he wants. And then I decided I wasn't going to leave until she was inside the building safely.
And when was the last time you saw your stepfather?
Well, other than being on the 401 and just noticing his car beside us, we had noticed him outside the apartment building that we were now living in. And, you know, just looking over and just, you know, seeing him walk. And so we knew that he had followed either my mother or myself to now know where we lived. And, you know, so we were unsettled with seeing him there, but because you're in this huge condominium building, you know, we didn't think that he would find us and certainly didn't think that he would be following, you know. I don't know how many days or how long he would sit out there waiting for us to leave, but obviously he followed either her or myself from our places of work to know where we now lived.
So your mother steps out of the car to talk to your stepfather, and what happens next?
Right. So at that point, I put my window down about this much because I wasn't going to leave until I knew she was safe. And they began talking to each other. And within a few minutes, he pulled out a gun. And he fired twice at my mother. She fell to the ground. And then he turned and fired twice at me. Instinctively, my hands went up into the air, and having done so, the bullet went in my right arm and shattered my right elbow, and then second bullet went into my left shoulder and basically came out in my arm. And yes, and then he jumped into his car and drove off. And so I'm now sitting in the vehicle, and I didn't feel any immediate pain. My arms were just numb. And I struggled to open the car door. And
we're going to take a quick pause. And when we get back, Marcia's mother is lying on the ground, injured. Marcia is wounded as well. But what happens in her life next will shock you. Stay with us.
Still to come on 100 Huntley Street.
The scars are there, and now 30 years later, the scars no longer hurt. And what God did, not only did He give me that beautiful gift to forgive my stepfather, He healed that wound.
I wanted to know who I was, why I was alive, and most importantly, what the future held for me.
It's a journey that I think all of us walk through on some level or another.
I think there's something in us that cries out and says, actually, no, there has to be something more.
What's right? What's wrong?
It was a 180-degree shift for me.
There was unspeakable peace in my heart.
I had a whole new set of values that began to impact my life and make me think about the direction I ought to go.
I couldn't think of anything worth seeking for in life more than that.
The whole process of training, which has continued to be an ongoing process, has been such a wonderful experience in my life. I've grown to know the Holy Spirit in a whole different way. I always thought I knew the Lord, but in this year, I've grown to know the Lord so much more deeply. And when I speak on the prayer line or when I pray, I can feel the Holy Spirit's presence in my life.
We get into a conversation where what their needs are, they're able to bring out their needs. And so the most consoling for me is the difference when they came on the phone and when they leave on the phone. They're full of hope. So really, my job, I feel here, is to be hope bearers. That's why this whole thing is so beautiful.
We are back with Marcia Smith, who was shot by her stepfather October 23rd, 1987. Your life changed forever. Your mother was also shot by your stepfather. Mm-hmm. So what happens next? You're shot, you're in the vehicle, your mother is outside. Mm-hmm. What happens next?
So I managed to open the car door with my arms basically dangling at the side. And I walked over to where my mother is now lying on the ground. The poor fellow on the inside in the lobby in the Holiday Inn, I screamed at him to call an ambulance. And then I managed to get down on the ground and I put my head on my mom's chest. And being my mom, in the midst of this, she began to stroke my head and she says, you know, it's going to be okay, Marcy. It's going to be okay. And as you can imagine, within minutes, the place is surrounded with police and ambulance. And I told them who it was, and the police took off. And then, you know, the ambulance began to tend to my mother and myself.
So you're taken to hospital. Your mom went to a separate hospital. Was she at the same hospital as you?
Immediately, we both were at the same hospital, and I could hear my mother groaning in the stall next to me. And I did not have any pulse in my left arm, and so I could hear them on the phone trying to find someone to tend to me because there's only one surgeon there. So at that point, we were separated, and I was brought to a hospital downtown Toronto, and my mother was taken into surgery.
And 10 days later, you get the news.
Right. So 10 days later, my father had flown up. He was living in the States at the time, and I heard him, you know, talking to someone that she needed to know. And this was the Sunday evening. He was now returning back home. And he knelt at my bed and he says, Marcy, I went to see your mom and she doesn't look too good. And at that point, my heart sank because I had had numerous surgeries to repair my arm, so I was barely awake most of the time. And my family would just tell me she was stable. That's all they kept telling me, she was stable. I would have one of my nurses call over to the hospital where she was, and, you know, everyone was trying to protect me. But that night, my dad was very honest and just said she didn't look too good. And the following morning, I was scheduled to have yet another surgery, trying to repair my arm. And they kept delaying it and delaying it and delaying it. And finally, the psychologist came in, 2 of them, and they were very sad. And I said, what's wrong? And they said, Marcy, we've been trying to find your family, but we want to let you know that your mom passed away today. And
this is the woman that, again, you two have been together for so long, gone through so much. What was going through your mind at that point?
To be honest, I froze.
Yeah.
And I begged them to take me to surgery. I just wanted to go to sleep, wanted to pretend I did not hear that news. I gave them some numbers and they called my family, and within minutes, you know, everyone had come. But I wanted to go to sleep. That was the hardest thing. I could not imagine not having my mom there.
Yeah.
But they refused to do the surgery that day, and rightly so. I was not in a place emotionally to do that. And I had a nurse's aide came. I don't know her name to this day, but she sat in my room, just sat there, which is all I needed.
Yeah.
And I just became very still until my family arrived. And so a very difficult day.
You essentially planned your mother's funeral from your hospital bed and was on a day pass to go to your mother's funeral.
Yes. And so that was very difficult, as you can imagine. You know, just working with my family to organize that. And then I had 2 friends came and they took me to the service. And I spent the day with my family and then was brought back to the hospital.
And through all of this, as you're going through surgeries, you have, you know, scars. Your arms are obviously working very fine.
Yes.
You also are going through a process in your mind about this man that took your mother's life and has injured you. When did faith start playing a role in this? Because you made a hard decision.
Well, I was in a Catholic hospital in a room by myself, and there is Jesus on the cross, just right across from my bed. And you know, you start talking, bartering with God, and how did this happen? Why did this happen? And you can imagine, I'm lying in bed, I have one free limb, and that's my right leg. Both arms are in a cast. My right leg is bandaged from my ankle to my hip because they had removed the vein there to, you know, fix my arm. And so I had to call the nurses with my teeth, you know, pinned to the call bed. And so while I'm in this state, I was there alone that day. Someone came to the room and they called my name. Not unusual, it's a teaching hospital, so there's always, you know, residents who are coming in. But this person, they just came, and I saw the feet, and then they left. And I turned my head around. And when I did that, I had this overwhelming sense I had forgiven my stepfather. Now, I found out days later that he had put the gun to his head, and he killed himself the same day. But I realized I had forgiven him. And then I began this whole process. You don't forgive someone who has done this. This doesn't make any sense. How can I forgive him? And it so alarmed me that I didn't tell anyone that I was experiencing this. And I kept, you know, just talking to Jesus on the cross. And I do believe that that whole experience was the prayers of my family, especially my grandmother. She's what you would call a prayer warrior. And she knew how to pray, but I just had this sense I had forgiven him. And with that came a peace. And it wasn't until months later, and you know, because I only went to church, I started going to church with my family because I could not bear to be home alone. And they were all picking up Sunday morning, and I went along. And I was a terrible visitor because I sat at the back of the church and I complained about everything. But slowly, you know, the love of the people and the presence of God, you know, just ministered to my heart. And in that process, I gave my heart to God. And it was only then that I realized that it was God who enabled me to forgive him. And it was only then, months later, I was able to share that with people, that I had this experience.
And Marcy, I think everybody watching is going to say, I would not blame you if you wanted to not forgive this man. And he took your mother, he has injured you, but why forgive?
Well, now that I understand the power of forgiveness, I say it was essential for me to forgive. If not, I believe I would be filled with bitterness, resentment, no peace, no joy. I would not be free. And what he did would have, you know, carried and hurt me the rest of my life. But by God's grace and his goodness and his love, he gave me this beautiful gift of forgiveness. And I am so grateful for God for that because, you know, this went on the news for quite a bit, and I'd bump into people that either knew my mother or myself, and they would approach me cautiously, thinking I was suffering. And yes, it was difficult to lose my mom. I don't want to minimize that. But in that place, I would meet them with a big smile. And they would be taken back. I would just see their reaction. They did not expect that. But that's what God did for me, and I believe that he can do that for everyone.
You talk about your scars and describe that. We only have seconds left. How you see your scars today?
Well, the scars are there. They're all over both arms and my leg. But, you know, the scars are there, and now 30 years later, the scars no longer hurt. And what God did, not only did he give me that beautiful gift to forgive my stepfather, he healed that wound. And so whenever I can look at the scars, I remember the event, but that angst, that hurt is no longer there. And so God indeed healed the memory, the hurt that's in the memory. And I could tell the story and tell the story time and time again, but that deep hurt is not there.
Wow.
And so that's the goodness of God.
Thank you, Marcia. Wow. Amazing, hopeful stories here on 100 Huntley Street. That's what I love to remind you. You know, Marcia's story could be a story that you'd see on any other TV show, but the difference is God. The difference is that she has a Heavenly Father that she could turn to and know that she's not by herself. I hope that you know that you're not by yourself. Maybe you also have scars that you're trying to process and you're still feeling the pain from them. Maybe you're still struggling through unforgiveness. I know it's not easy. I will be the first one to say forgiveness is not easy, but we are commanded to do it. God knows that when we release people from our lives, we live more freely and we're able to allow him to work through us because we've released that unforgiveness in our lives. And so would you maybe take that challenge from Marcia today? Maybe release somebody that you've had, that you've been holding on to, you've been just griping and complaining about that person, and just release them to Jesus today. Please do call our prayer lines. They're at the bottom of our screen, 1-866-273-4444. Amazing prayer partners that would love to pray with you, journey with you, agree with you that forgiveness is the right way to go. They'd love to get a Bible into your hands, get you connected to a community of Bible-believing, Jesus-believing people that love you and love him, and just get you straight on that journey. Again, it is not easy. I'm not going to tell you it is. I'm pretty sure Marcia would say that as well. But it is a choice that we can make freely today. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Marcia is one amazing lady, Maggie. The power of forgiveness. We've been talking about that this month, and that's why we want to get this important book, Love Like You've Never Been Hurt, by Pastor Jensen Franklin, because that is the key. Look at the life that she's now living. She's a pastor, she's serving people, and what an amazing lady.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we all can say, oh, but you don't know what I've gone through. I can't forgive that person. If Marcia can forgive a man who killed her own mother and has permanently damaged her, she has scars on her arms, then you can forgive. I can forgive. You can forgive. We all can forgive those that have done wrong to us.
And one of the things Jesus wants to set us free. I travel around a lot, and I got suitcases, cameras, and that's a part of getting to where you got to get to. But in life, if you're carrying all that baggage of pain and anger, you're not free. The Lord wants to set us free. And again, as you were mentioning at the end there, we have great prayer people standing by, 1-866-273-4444. We want to let you know there are people that have experienced pain as well. Maybe not like Marcia, but they would love to talk to you.
Yeah, and if you just want some practical ways of how to do that, how do I step into forgiveness, do call and get your copy of Love Like You've Never Been Hurt today. Thanks for joining us today. Hope you've been encouraged. We have.
Powerful interview.
Bye.
See you next time.
Thank you for your